Okay, so Giancarlo Esposito in the MCU. Big rumor, something we've been talking about for a while. Leading into San Diego Comic-Con, one of my favorite rumors, and we talked about it. We did a vibe check. We did a poll. We did all this stuff. One of my favorite rumors was that Giancarlo Esposito was going to come out, and they were going to announce that he's going to be Professor X, okay? Now, obviously, that didn't happen. However, I think it could actually still be happening or still be on track. There's a lot of questions here about, the recent stories about the X-Men, about how maybe due to contracts via Fox of the producers and the actors that Marvel can't even. Like, what if Marvel can't even with the X-Men, until 2025? That's kind of a bummer. Regardless, I think a lot of people are pretty hyped up on Giancarlo Esposito coming to the MCU in some such way. And I want to show you the video here of what he said at the Comic-Con. And, man, he brings an incredible amount of energy. And I think it's pretty dope. So, here, let me frame it like that. And boom. We'll check it out like this, okay? And he says some really cool stuff about Star Wars and Joseph Campbell and shit, too. So I'm a big fan of that.
That dream. So, I have not worked for Marvel yet. I've been in a room with them and talked to them. And to answer your question, I think what they do is on the lines of that mythological journey that Joe Campbell talked about, who happened to be a friend of George Lucas, that George Lucas put into his stories.
Yeah, so Joseph Campbell once said that George Lucas was his greatest student. And I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, The Hero of a Thousand Faces, The Power of Myth, incredible books, very formative to me. So it's really cool to hear Giancarlo talking about that.
Do the same thing. It is our dream and intention to save the world, our environment, to save the world from greedy corporations, to uplift the world and have leadership that thinks about us for the people, by the people, which means that those future leaders are in this room right now.
Amen.
Right? And so we want to inspire each other. We want to lift each other up, because what happens when that happens is then we actually do have a vision and a dream for a new world. Then we can actually start to reverse all...
Now, here's the thing about this, right? Because you could just say, oh, man, he's just going off on some wild shit right here. And to a degree, that's true. He's just kind of, really in the vibe. He's like talking about stories, the power, which was a big part of what Campbell was talking about as well. Story, create myth, create, idea to strive for, pushes society forward. But I actually low-key think he's already Professor X. That this is him performing as Charles. Charles holds a lot of these same ideas and ideals as well. And it just feels so... There's something going on here, you know what I mean, with what he says. And we'll get to the end of it, too, because it's like pretty clear that he really wants to play Professor X. But let's keep going.
All the things that we have destroyed that will choke us if we don't change how we move through this universe. So, there's the talk of Magneto. There's the talk of Dr. Freeze.
And people are like, literally, people are like, Doctor Who? What the fuck? But, it's all good.
There has been talk of, who else are they talking about over there?
Dr.
Doom.
Victor Von Doom.
Doom.
Yeah.
And there is Professor X.
Don't do this to us. Pick one.
Pick one. I'm going to go for something that is a little bit different.
Ooh.
I'm going to go and put it out in the universe that it is Professor X.
So, again, listen to what he says at the end there. Like, okay, a couple of different things going on here. First of all, I just think this stuff's so fun, right? But if you listen to what he's saying, he does this whole thing about, myth and story, and he does this whole thing about trying to inspire and this thing, right? Ideals to strive for, right? He says all of these different things, and then he ends by saying Professor X. Then he literally says, I'm going to put it out in the universe that it is Professor X. And I think one of the key points there was what he said right before it, where he said, I want to do something a little bit different. Now, most of the time when we see Giancarlo in the movies or the shows, he's a villain. incredible. I mean, I think this kind of happened because of Gus, right? An incredible villain. Holy shit, Breaking Bad. Incredible, right? Crazy stuff, great performance, haunting. You know what I mean? Really, really good. Then you've got the Stan Edgar character for The Boys. Incredible. You've got Moff Gideon, right? He's literally the bad guy of one of the Fallout games, okay? So he's kind of, he's kind of been typecast and thrown in there, and he's really, really good at it. And I just feel like the energy kind of coming off of this dude that's permeating through is like, not only does he want to be Professor X, he really wants to be Professor X. And I think that in his career path and in his filmography, I think he's in love with the idea of turning his typecast on its head and in becoming Charles and in all that would entail for the MCU version of this character, okay? So that's the vibe that I am getting from Giancarlo Esposito. Now, the question is, there's a couple of different questions here. Number one, how do you guys feel about it? Now, we've already done sort of a vibe check on Giancarlo Esposito as Charles Xavier. Some people don't love it. Some people love it. For me, I think I could totally see him as Charles. Now, there's like, oh, but it's like a race bend thing, or you need Charles to be this elitist, coming from privileged white man. Like, I've heard this before. Because one of the ideas of Charles is like, he has to come from privilege and yet identify with the underprivileged or the underserved. And that's kind of a part of his arc. I don't necessarily see that as a problem. Like, I think you could figure that out with Giancarlo Esposito. There's also questions about Magneto. Would you then have a black Magneto? Would you have a white Magneto? What are you going to do with Magneto? Magneto's Jewish history is very important to the character. And so there's a lot of questions going on with all of this, right? To me, he passes the vibe check as Charles, and I think it would be brilliant. I also think it's important to understand that this is not the X-Men from the comics. This is not the X-Men from the 90s show. This isn't even the X-Men from many of the other universes that are out there in the Marvel multiverse. This is the X-Men of the MCU 616. And 616 is just radically different than the comic books. Like, that's just the truth. It is all over the place. I mean, Miss Marvel is a mutant, right? So a lot of wild stuff here. And I think given the context of this being this new Marvel universe, I actually think he would kill it as Charles Xavier. And before I watched this video, I was like, oh man, he's probably going to be Doom. Because I was operating under this impression that Giancarlo, yes, maybe he wants to be Charles, but if these reports are true, that Fox is kind of holding Feige back, where Feige cannot do X-Men, he can't reboot at all or do any of these things until 2025, maybe Giancarlo is a little bit too old. Maybe that's just too far out. Like, the studio could want something different. He could want something different. And this is all really, really interesting, right? I don't know. But when I first processed this news, before actually watching him speak, I was like, he'll probably be Dr. Doom. Because he can't be Charles anytime soon. If those reports are true, and I hope they're not, right? Because I want the X-Men now. But if they're true, he can't be Charles anytime soon. But to be honest, if he's got to film multiple more seasons of The Boys, if he has to finish out stuff with Mando season 2 or season 3, season 4, then maybe this is the perfect timing. Maybe they're planting the seeds now and trying to figure out who's going to be the Charles Xavier of 616, and they're operating understanding that it won't happen until 2025. So it's possible that he will be Charles, and it'll happen in 2025, and they've just kind of paced it out and explained it that way. So I don't know, man. That's kind of the news. It's all rumor for now, but I think it's awesome. And again, his energy is so infectious about this, and I think he would be great in all of those roles. But upon watching that video, though, really feels like he's going to be Charles Xavier to me, or at least it feels like that's what he really, really wants. So I don't know. Of course, let me know what you guys think